A millionaire went to an orphanage to donate food and found a girl identical to his wife. The rain it fell incessantly on the city, forming puddles in the streets and soaking the few passers-by who dared to go out. Among them, a tall, elegant man walked with a determined step, holding a black umbrella that contrasted with his gray suit. This was Raphael, a businessman known for his success in business, but even more so for his generous heart. Arriving in front of an old and somewhat deteriorated building, Raphael stopped. The sign above the door read, San Miguel Children's Home. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart speed up slightly. The same thing always happened to him when he visited this place. With a gentle push, he opened the door and entered. The aroma of freshly cooked food and the sound of children's laughter greeted him, enveloping him in a warm atmosphere that contrasted with the cold outside. "Mr. Raphael," a female voice exclaimed. It was the director of the orphanage, Mrs. Martinez, who approached with a smile from ear to ear. "What a joy to see you here, especially on such a gray day." Raphael smiled back, feeling how the human warmth of the place melted the tension in his shoulders. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Martinez. I brought some things that I thought might be useful." He gestured toward the door, where several men were beginning to bring in boxes full of food, clothing, and toys. Mrs. Martinez put a hand to her mouth, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Oh, Raphael, I don't know how to thank you. You always show up when we need you most." Raphael felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't just generosity that brought him here. It was a deep need, a void in his heart that was only filled when he was surrounded by these children. "There is nothing to be grateful for," he replied in a soft voice. Can I see them?" Mrs. Martinez nodded, guiding him towards the dining room. Upon entering, Raphael was greeted by a chorus of excited children's voices. "It's Mr. Raphael. He's come to visit us. Have you brought us gifts?" The businessman felt his heart swell with emotion. Here, among these children who had lost so much, he found purpose, a reason to keep going. With a genuine smile, he prepared to greet each of the little ones, aware that each hug, each smile, each kind word, not only illuminated their lives, but also gradually healed the wounds in his own heart. "Mr. Raphael, would you like to accompany me to my office for a moment?" Raphael nodded, temporarily saying goodbye to the little ones. He followed the director down a narrow hallway to a small room that served as an office. "Please sit down," Mrs. Martinez offered, indicating a worn chair in front of her desk. Raphael settled down, noticing the walls covered in children's drawings and photos of smiling children. The director sat in front of him, intertwining her fingers on the desk. "Mr. Raphael, excuse my boldness, but you have always intrigued me. You are a very successful man. You could be enjoying unimaginable luxuries, and yet..." Raphael smiled sadly, his eyes fixed on a photo of a group of children playing in the yard. "And yet I prefer to spend my time here, surrounded by orphan children," he completed, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Martinez nodded, her eyes full of compassion. Raphael sighed deeply, feeling the weight of his memories on his shoulders. "You see, Mrs. Martinez, I learned a long time ago that money cannot buy happiness. I had everything the world could offer, and in an instant, I lost it all." Her voice cracked slightly, and the director held her breath, feeling the deep sadness emanating from him. "My wife, my daughter, I lost them in an accident years ago. Since then, nothing has filled that void. Nothing except..." He stopped, looking toward the closed door, beyond which the children's laughter could be heard. "Except being here," Mrs. Martinez completed softly. Raphael nodded, a lone tear rolling down his cheek. "These children, they remind me of what is important in life. Love, hope, innocence. I don't need luxurious mansions or expensive cars. What I need is this: the opportunity to make a difference, to give love to those who need it most." Mrs. Martinez extended her hand, taking Raphael's hand in a gesture of comfort. "And you do, Mr. Raphael. You have no idea how much your presence means to these children, and to us." An emotional silence filled the small office. Raphael felt exposed, vulnerable, but at the same time strangely at peace. For the first time in a long time, he felt like someone really saw him, not the successful businessman, but the broken man who sought redemption in the eyes of the children he helped. Suddenly, a joyous shout from the hallway broke the moment. "Mr. Raphael, where are you? Come play with us." A genuine smile lit up Raphael's face. She stood up, discreetly wiping away the tear. "Duty calls," he said with a slight laugh. As she headed toward the door, Mrs. Martinez couldn't help but think that, despite his wealth, Raphael was perhaps the richest man she had ever met, not in money, but in heart. And as she watched him disappear down the hallway, she wondered what other secrets this enigmatic benefactor kept. "It's beautiful, Miguel," Raphael responded, crouching down to get a better look. "Tell me what it is?" "It's you," Miguel said proudly. "He's handing out gifts like a superhero." Raphael felt his heart shrink. "A superhero, huh? I don't think it's that big of a deal." "Of course," insisted a nearby girl. "You bring us nice things and make us laugh. That's what superheroes do, right?" Raphael looked around, observing the smiling faces of the children. Each of them had a sad story, a painful past, and yet here they were, laughing and playing as if the world was a wonderful place. He sat in a small chair, surrounded by the children who settled around him, eager to listen to him. "You know, you are the real superheroes," Raphael said in a soft but emotional voice. "Every day they face challenges that many adults couldn't handle. And yet, here they are, smiling and filling this place with joy." The children looked at him with wide, curious eyes, drinking in every word. "But, Mr. Raphael," said a girl timidly, "you have everything. Money, a big house. Why do you say that we are superheroes?" Raphael felt a lump in his throat. How to explain to them that all those material things meant nothing compared to what they had? How can we make them understand that their ability to love and be happy despite everything was a superpower in itself? "You see, children," he began, choosing his words carefully, "having things doesn't make you happy. What really matters is the love you give and receive. And you have so much love to give." He paused for a moment, fighting back the tears that threatened to escape. "Every time I come here, they teach me something new about strength, hope, and unconditional love. That's what makes them superheroes." A reflective silence fell over the group. Then, little by little, the children began to smile. Some even dared to hug Raphael. "So, can we be your superhero family?" Miguel asked innocently. Raphael felt his heart stop for a moment. Family, a word he had avoided for so long, that caused him so much pain. And yet, here he was, surrounded by these little ones who offered him their love without conditions. "Yes," he finally answered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I would love for you to be my superhero family." The children burst into cheers and laughter, hugging Raphael with all the strength of their little arms. And as he hugged them back, Raphael felt something change inside him. A wall he had built around his heart was beginning to crack, letting in a ray of hope he hadn't felt in years. But even in the midst of this joy, a feeling of unease came over him. Was he really ready to open his heart again? And what would happen if he did? The fear of losing everything again fought against the desire to love and be loved. As the children continued to chat and laugh around him, Raphael couldn't help but wonder what the future held for him. Would I be able to heal completely? And what role would these children play in his life from now on? His heart skipped a beat. The girl, about 8 years old, had curly brown hair and big, sad eyes that stared at her untouched plate of food. But what really shook him was the resemblance. It was like looking at a ghost from the past. "My God," Raphael whispered, his voice barely audible. She's identical to Maria." On shaky legs, he stood up, softly apologizing to the children around him. She walked slowly towards the girl's table, feeling as if the world around her was fading away. "Hello," he said softly when he reached the table. "Can I sit with you?" The girl looked up, surprised. Her deep brown eyes met Raphael's, and for a moment he felt like time stopped. "Yes, sir," she replied quietly, quickly returning her gaze to the plate. Raphael sat up, trying to control the trembling of his hands. "My name is Raphael. What is your name?" "Clara," the girl responded without looking up. Raphael felt his heart race. Even his name was similar to that of his late wife, Carmen. "It's a very nice name, Clara. Have you been here long?" Clara shrugged. "I don't know. A long time, I think." Raphael watched how the girl played with her food, without actually eating it. There was a sadness in her that went beyond the situation she found herself in. It was as if he were carrying a weight too big for his small shoulders. "You know, I feel sad sometimes too," Raphael said, surprising himself for sharing something so personal. Clara looked up, curious. "You? But you have everything you want." Raphael smiled sadly. "Having things doesn't mean being happy, Clara. Sometimes what we want most can't be bought." "Like what?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Like a family," Raphael responded, feeling a lump in his throat. "A long time ago, I lost my wife and my daughter. Since then, I have felt very alone." Clara's eyes filled with understanding. "I feel lonely sometimes too. Although there are a lot of children here, it's not the same as having a real family, right?" Raphael felt his heart break a little more. "No, it's not," he said softly. Then, without thinking, he spread his hand across the table. "But maybe, if we keep each other company, we can feel a little less alone." Clara looked at Raphael's outstretched hand for a moment, hesitating. Then slowly she placed her small hand on his. At that moment, Raphael felt as if an electric current passed through him. It was a familiar sensation, an echo of a past he thought lost forever. And as he looked into Clara's eyes, a crazy idea began to form in his mind. Could it be possible? Could this girl be? No, it was crazy. And yet, the resemblance, the instant connection I felt, Raphael knew he was on the verge of something big, something that could change his life forever. But he also knew that if he was wrong, if he allowed himself to hope only to see it shattered again, it might be more than his heart could bear. While holding Clara's hand, Raphael found himself at a crossroads. Should you follow your heart and explore this inexplicable connection? Or should you protect yourself and keep your distance? "Clara," he said softly, "would you like to take a walk with me in the garden? We could talk a little more." The girl looked at him, a mix of curiosity and caution in her eyes. After a moment that seemed eternal, he nodded slowly. "It's okay," he replied quietly. Together, they got up and headed towards the door that led to the orphanage's small garden. Raphael could feel the curious stares of the other children and the staff, but in that moment, his entire world had shrunk to the small hand that held his. Once outside, the fresh air surrounded them. The garden, although modest, was well kept, with some colorful flowers that contrasted with the gray of the cloudy day. "Do you like it out here, Clara?" Raphael asked, trying to break the ice. Clara nodded, her eyes scanning the garden. "Yes, it's quiet. Sometimes I come here to think." "And what are you thinking about?" Raphael ventured to ask, his voice soft and charged with emotion. The girl stopped in front of a rose bush, gently touching a petal with her free hand. "In my family," he answered after a moment, "about how it was before, and how it could be now if things were different." Raphael felt his heart shrink. "I understand that feeling," he said, crouching down to be level with Clara. "I also think a lot about my lost family." Clara looked at him, her eyes filled with wisdom beyond her years. "Do you think we will ever stop feeling sad?" Raphael felt tears threatening to flow, but he held them back. "I don't know, Clara, but maybe we can learn to be happy again in a different way." At that moment, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating Clara's face. Raphael held his breath. The resemblance to his late wife was even more striking in that light. "Clara," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "can I ask you something?" The girl nodded, looking at him curiously. "Do you remember anything about your life before you came here? About your parents?" Clara frowned, as if trying to remember something far away. "Not much," he admitted. I remember the sound of laughter, the smell of freshly baked cookies. And," she paused, her eyes filling with tears, "I remember an accident, a lot of noise and then nothing." Raphael felt like his world was shaking. Could it be possible? Could this girl really be? "Clara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I need to tell you, something that could change our lives forever." The girl looked at him, her eyes wide and expectant. Raphael knew he was about to cross a point of no return. What he said next could bring hope or more pain. But as he looked at Clara, he felt his heart make the decision for him. "I think," he began, his voice shaking with emotion, "I think you might be my long-lost daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara stared at him, her eyes a mixture of confusion, fear, and hope. Raphael knew that he had just opened a door that he couldn't close. What would happen now? How would Clara react? What if I was wrong? The future suddenly seemed as uncertain as it was promising. And as he waited for Clara's response, Raphael realized that, for the first time in years, he was truly alive, feeling every beat of his heart with overwhelming intensity. His daughter?" he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. Raphael nodded slowly, his heart pounding. "Yes, Clara. Years ago, I lost my wife and daughter in an accident. But now, seeing you, hearing your story, I feel like it could be possible that you are that girl." Clara took a step back, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. But I don't remember. How can you be sure?" Raphael knelt in front of her, their eyes at the same level. "I'm not completely sure, Clara, but there's something about you, in your eyes, in your smile. You remind me so much of my wife, of the family I lost." Tears began to roll down Clara's cheeks. I've always dreamed of having a family, but I'm afraid. What if I'm not who you think I am?" Raphael felt his own heart break at the fear and vulnerability in Clara's voice. He extended his hand slowly, offering it to the girl. "Clara, I understand your fear. I'm scared too. But what if we are? What if you're really my daughter? Don't you think it's worth finding out?" Clara looked at Raphael's outstretched hand, hesitating. Her eyes moved between the man's hand and face, searching for something, perhaps a sign that she could trust him. I don't know what to do," he finally said, his voice cracking with emotion. Raphael felt his heart shrink. "We don't have to do anything right now, Clara. We can take it step by step. How about we start as friends? I can come visit you more often, we can talk, get to know each other better. And if over time we feel like it's right, we can investigate more about your past, about whether you are really my daughter." Clara seemed to relax a little at these words. Slowly, she extended her small hand and placed it in Raphael's. I'd like that," she said softly, a small smile appearing on her face through the tears. Raphael felt his heart fill with a warmth he had not experienced in years. Carefully, he pulled Clara towards him and wrapped her in a gentle hug. "Thank you, Clara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise that no matter what happens, I will be here for you." As he hugged the girl, Raphael felt something change inside him. The inexplicable connection he felt with Clara, whether she was his biological daughter or not, had awakened something he thought had been dead for a long time. Hope. But along with that hope also came fear. What if I was wrong? What if in the end it turned out that Clara was not his daughter? Could his heart handle another loss? As they separated from the embrace, Raphael looked into Clara's eyes and saw in them a reflection of his own emotions. Hope, fear, longing. And in that moment, he knew that, no matter what the future held for them, he could no longer walk away. Clara had become a part of his life, and he was willing to face any challenges that came with that. "What do we do now?" Clara asked, her voice small but filled with curiosity. Raphael smiled softly. "Now, my dear Clara, we begin our journey together, one step at a time." And as they walked back to the orphanage, hand in hand, Raphael couldn't help but feel that, for the first time in a long time, he was on the right path. The future was uncertain, but he was no longer alone to face it. "Clara," he said softly, stopping in the hallway, "would you mind if we sat down for a moment? There's something I need to tell you." The girl nodded, her eyes filled with curiosity and a hint of worry. They sat on a small bench near the window, the gray light of the cloudy day bathing their faces. Raphael took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment before beginning. "Years ago, on a night like this, rainy and cold, my life changed forever." Clara watched him intently, not saying a word, but her small hand slipped into Raphael's, offering silent comfort. My wife Carmen and I had gone out to dinner to celebrate her birthday. Our little daughter, Maria, was with us. She was your age, Clara. Raphael's voice cracked slightly. On the way back, the rain was so hard we could barely see the road. And then, Raphael stopped, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. Clara squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. There was an accident. A truck lost control and crashed into our car. When I woke up in the hospital, they told me that Carmen had died instantly. Tears were running freely down Raphael's cheeks now. And Maria, my little Maria, they never found her. The rescuers said she had probably been thrown from the car, but after days of searching, there was no sign of her. Clara gasped softly, her own eyes filling with tears. They never found her? Whisper. Raphael shook his head. Never. For years, I refused to believe he was gone. I kept searching, hoping, praying for a miracle. He turned to look Clara directly in the eyes. And now, seeing you, Clara, I can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, that miracle has happened. Clara looked at him with a mixture of amazement and fear. But what if I'm not her? What if I'm giving her false hope? Raphael smiled sadly. Clara, from the moment I saw you, something inside me woke up, a hope that I thought had died a long time ago. I don't know if you are my Maria, but what I do know is that, in some way, you have brought light of new to my life. The girl was silent for a moment, processing everything she had just heard. Then, with a trembling but determined voice, she said, Mr. Raphael, I don't know if I am your daughter, but I would like to find out. Together, Raphael felt his heart swell with emotion. He hugged Clara tightly, their tears mixing. Thank you, my little one. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. As they hugged each other, Raphael couldn't help but think about the challenges that awaited them. How could they confirm if Clara was really their lost daughter? What if it wasn't? Could his heart handle another loss? But looking into Clara's eyes, full of hope and courage, Raphael knew that it didn't matter what the future held for them. They had found something special, a connection that transcended blood and time. And that, he thought, was a miracle in itself. What do we do now? Clara asked, her voice filled with a mix of fear and excitement. Raphael wiped away his tears and smiled. Now, my dear Clara, we begin our search. Together, we will unravel this mystery and, no matter what happens, I promise that I will be by your side every step of the way. And as they rose to face what was to come, Raphael felt that, for the first time in years, he was truly alive. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer alone to walk it. With Clara by his side, he was ready to face any challenge that fate put in front of them. Are you ready? He asked softly. Clara nodded, squeezing Raphael's hand. Yes, I'm ready. Raphael knocked on the door and, after hearing a come in from inside, they entered Mrs. Martinez's office together. The director looked up from her papers. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw Raphael and Clara together. Mr. Raphael, Clara, what can I do for you? Raphael took a deep breath before speaking. Mrs. Martinez, we have something important to discuss with you. It's about Clara and her possible identity. Mrs. Martinez frowned, confused. Your identity? I don't understand, Mr. Raphael. Raphael guided Clara to sit down and then sat down himself, still holding the girl's hand. You see, Mrs. Martinez, I think there is a possibility that Clara is my long-lost daughter. The silence that followed this statement was deafening. Mrs. Martinez looked at Raphael, then at Clara, and back at Raphael, her face a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. But how is it possible? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Raphael proceeded to explain his theory, talking about the accident, his daughter's disappearance, and the similarities he had noticed in Clara. As he spoke, Mrs. Martinez's expression went from disbelief to understanding and finally to cautious hope. My God, the director said when Raphael finished his explanation. It is an astonishing possibility, But, Mr. Raphael, we must be cautious. We cannot raise false hopes, neither for you nor for Clara. Clara, who had remained silent until now, spoke with a trembling but determined voice. Mrs. Martinez, I know it's hard to believe, but I feel like this could be true. I've always felt like something was missing in my life, and now, the director looked at Clara tenderly. I understand you, dear, but we must proceed carefully. We will have to do tests, investigations. Raphael nodded. Of course, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. DNA testing, whatever. I just want to know the truth, for Clara's sake and my own. Mrs. Martinez leaned back in her chair, her mind clearly working at full speed. This is extraordinary. If it turns out to be true, it would be a miracle. But we must also prepare for the possibility that it is not. Raphael felt Clara tense next to him and squeezed her hand gently. I know, he said softly, but no matter what happens, my commitment to Clara will not change. If it turns out that she is not my biological daughter, I would still like to be a part of her life, if she allows it. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she heard these words, and she leaned down to hug Raphael. Mrs. Martinez observed the scene with moist eyes. Good, the director finally said, her voice thick with emotion. We will begin the necessary paperwork immediately. But I warn you, this process can be long and emotionally draining. Are you sure you want to move forward? Raphael and Clara looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Then, in unison, they nodded. We're sure, Raphael said, his voice firm but filled with emotion. As they left Mrs. Martinez's office, Raphael couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and fear. They were about to embark on a journey that could change their lives forever. He looked at Clara, who was walking beside him with a new light in her eyes, and knew that, no matter the outcome, they were no longer alone. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Raphael faced it with hope. With Clara by his side, he felt like he could overcome any obstacle. And as they walked together into the unknown, Raphael realized that, in some way, they had already formed a family, united by the love and hope they had found in each other. What's wrong, little one? He asked softly, stopping to look into her eyes. Clara looked up, her eyes filled with an emotion that Raphael couldn't immediately decipher. Mr. Raphael, she began, her voice trembling slightly. What will happen if I'm not your daughter? Raphael felt his heart clench at the vulnerability in Clara's voice. He knelt in front of her, taking her small hands in his. Clara, look at me, he said in a soft but firm voice. I want you to understand something very important. Yes, there is a possibility that you are my biological daughter, and that would be wonderful. But even if the results say that you are not, that won't change how I feel about you. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Really? Raphael nodded, feeling his own eyes water. Really? In these weeks that we have spent together, you have become a very important part of my life. Biological daughter or not, I love you, Clara. And if you wish, I would like to be part of your life, whatever be the result of the tests. Clara stared at him for a moment, as if searching for the truth in his eyes. Then, without warning, she launched herself into his arms, hugging him with all the strength her small body could muster. I love it too, Mr. Raphael, she sobbed against his chest. I don't care what the tests say. To me, you are already my dad. Raphael felt his heart overflow with emotion. She hugged Clara tightly, tears running freely down her cheeks. In that moment, he understood that the bond they had formed went beyond blood or DNA. It was a bond of love, trust, and mutual understanding. My little Clara, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. You don't know how much those words mean to me. I see you as my daughter too, and I promise that I will always be here for you, no matter what happens. They stayed like that for a long time, hugging each other in the middle of the garden, their hearts beating in unison. When they finally separated, Raphael saw a new light in Clara's eyes, a mixture of joy and determination. How about we go get some ice cream? Raphael suggested, wiping away his tears and smiling. Clara nodded enthusiastically, her face lighting up. Yes, please. As they walked together to the ice cream parlor, their hands intertwined, Raphael realized that, no matter what the test results said, he had already found what he had searched for so long: a family. Clara had brought joy and purpose back into his life, and he was determined to do the same for her. The future was still uncertain, but they no longer feared it. Together, they were ready to face any challenge life threw their way. And as the sun began to set on the horizon, bathing the city in golden tones, Raphael and Clara walked toward their shared future, united by a bond stronger than blood, the unconditional love of a chosen family. Clara, Raphael called softly. The girl looked up, her eyes wide and filled with a mix of hope and fear. Are the results already?" he asked with a trembling voice. Raphael nodded, extending his hand towards her. "Yes, little one. Are you ready to go find them together?" Clara took his hand and stood up, breathing deeply. "I'm scared," he confessed in a whisper. Raphael knelt in front of her, looking directly into her eyes. "I'm scared too, Clara, but remember what we talked about. Whatever happens, we're in this together. Okay?" The girl nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. "Okay, Dad." Raphael's heart swelled with emotion upon hearing that word. Together, they walked to the car and headed to the lab. The trip passed in a silence filled with anticipation. When they finally arrived and entered the doctor's office, Raphael could feel Clara's hand shaking in his. The doctor received them with a friendly smile. "Mr. Mendoza, Clara, please take a seat." They sat down, their hands still clasped. The doctor opened an envelope and took out a piece of paper. "I have the results of the DNA tests here," the doctor began, his voice neutral. After a thorough analysis, Raphael held his breath, feeling as if the entire world had stopped. "We can confirm with 99.9% certainty that Clara is, indeed, your biological daughter, Mr. Mendoza." The silence that followed was deafening. Raphael looked at Clara, whose eyes had filled with tears. "Clara," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion, "you are my daughter. You are truly my Maria." Clara threw herself into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Dad, Dad." Raphael hugged her tightly, his own tears mixing with his daughter's. Years of pain, loss, and loneliness melted away in that moment, replaced by a joy so intense I could barely contain it. "My girl," she murmured through tears. "My little Maria, I found you. After so long, I finally found you." The doctor watched them with an excited smile, giving them space to process the news. When they finally broke apart, Raphael took Clara's face in his hands, looking at her adoringly. "Do you know what this means, Clara? It means you can come live with me. We can be a real family." Clara's eyes lit up. "Really? Can I come live with you?" Raphael nodded, laughing through his tears. "Yes, my love. We will do everything necessary for you to come home with me. Our house." They left the laboratory feeling as if they were floating, their hearts overflowing with joy and hope. As they walked to the car, Clara looked at Raphael. "Dad," he said, savoring the word, "what are we going to do now?" Raphael lifted her into his arms, spinning with her. "Now, my little Maria, we are going to start our new life together. We have so much to recover, so many moments to create." As they drove away, Raphael couldn't stop smiling. The emptiness he had felt for so many years had finally been filled. He had found his daughter, and with her, a new reason to live. The future that once seemed so bleak now shone with promises of joy and love. Raphael knew that the road would not be easy, that they would have to learn to be father and daughter, to heal the wounds of the past. But as he looked at Clara, who was humming happily in the passenger seat, he knew that together they could overcome any obstacle. Life had given them a second chance, and they were determined to make the most of it. Raphael opened the door to his apartment, holding Clara's small suitcase in one hand and his daughter's hand in the other. "Welcome home, my little one," he said in a soft voice, full of emotion. Clara entered timidly, her eyes roaming every corner of the spacious apartment. It's so big," she whispered, amazed. Raphael smiled, crouching down to be at her height. "And now it's your home too. Come, let me show you your room." He led her down the hallway to a door painted a soft lavender color. "I decorated it with you in mind," he explained, opening the door with a theatrical gesture. Clara's eyes widened as she saw the room. The walls were painted a delicate pastel shade, with sparkling stars attached to the ceiling. A four-poster bed, a desk, shelves full of books, and a play corner awaited her. "Is all this for me?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Raphael nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "All for you, my love. Do you like it?" Clara turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. Without saying a word, she threw herself into his arms, hugging him tightly. "Thank you, Dad," she sobbed into his chest. "It's perfect." Raphael hugged her back, his own eyes becoming moist. "You are perfect, my little Maria, and I promise that I will do everything I can to make you happy here." That night, after eating dinner and unpacking Clara's few belongings, Raphael tucked her into her new bed. He sat next to her, gently stroking her hair. "How do you feel, honey?" he asked tenderly. Clara looked at him, her eyes bright in the dim light of the bedside lamp. "Happy," he said with a small smile, "but also a little scared." Raphael nodded understandingly. "It's normal to feel this way. It's a big change for both of us. But I want you to know that we are in this together. We will learn together to be a family. And if—" Clara started, but stopped, biting her lip. "What if what, my love?" Raphael gently encouraged her. "What if I'm not the daughter you expected?" Clara whispered, her eyes full of vulnerability. Raphael felt his heart shrink. He took Clara's small hand in his. "Clara, my little Maria, listen to me carefully. You are more than I ever dared to hope or dream of. You are brave, intelligent, and you have a huge heart. I couldn't be more proud to be your father." Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks. "I love you, Dad," she said with a trembling voice. "And I love you, my girl," Raphael responded, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "More than words can express." As Clara fell asleep, Raphael stayed by her side, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. His mind wandered to the challenges they would face. Helping Clara adjust to her new life, dealing with past traumas, learning to be the father she needed. But as he watched his daughter sleeping peacefully, Raphael felt a renewed determination. It wouldn't be easy, but they were together now, and together they could overcome any obstacle. "I promise you, my little Mary," he whispered into the darkness, "that I will do everything in my power to give you the happy life you deserve. We are a family now, and nothing and no one will be able to tear us apart again." With that silent promise, Raphael prepared to face the future. A future full of hope, love, and the joy of rediscovering fatherhood with his lost and found daughter. One night while they were having dinner, Clara suddenly dropped her fork, her face shadowed by a sad expression. "What's wrong, honey?" Raphael asked, worried by the sudden change in his daughter's mood. Clara looked up, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Dad, can I ask you something about Mom?" Raphael felt his heart stop for a moment. They had talked about Carmen before, but never in depth. He took a deep breath, preparing for what was to come. "Of course, my love. You can ask me anything you want." Clara hesitated for a moment before speaking. "What was she like? Do you think that she would have loved me if she were here?" Raphael felt a lump form in his throat. He stood up from his chair and knelt next to Clara, taking her small hands in his. "Oh, Clara," he said in a soft voice, heavy with emotion. "Your mother was the most wonderful person I have ever met. She had a smile that lit up the entire room, just like yours. And she loved you, my girl. She loved you with all her heart from the moment she knew you were on your way." Tears began to roll down Clara's cheeks. "Really?" Raphael nodded, fighting his own tears. "Really? She used to sing lullabies to you when you were still in her womb. She said you would be a special little girl, destined to do wonderful things. And she was right. Clara threw herself into her father's arms, sobbing softly. Raphael hugged her, tightly stroking her hair. "I miss her, Dad," Clara murmured through her tears. "Although I don't remember her, I miss her." "I know, my love," Raphael responded, his voice cracking with emotion. "I miss her too. But you know what? She lives in you, in your smile, in your laughter, in your kindness. Every day I see a little of her in you." They stayed like that for a long time, hugging each other, sharing their pain and their love. When they finally separated, Raphael saw a new light in Clara's eyes, a mix of sadness and determination. "Dad," Clara said, wiping away tears, "can we go to Mom's place tomorrow? I want to talk to her." Raphael felt a mixture of pride and pain at his daughter's bravery. "Of course I do, my little one. We'll go together." The next day, father and daughter were in front of Carmen's tombstone. Clara left a small bouquet of flowers and then, to Raphael's surprise, began to speak. "Hello, Mom," he said, his voice shaky but firm. "It's me, Clara. You're Maria. I wanted to tell you that I love you, even if I don't remember you, and that I'm taking care of Dad, like I know you would want." Raphael felt his heart swell with love and pride. As she listened to her daughter speak to her absent mother, she knew they were taking an important step in her healing process. That night, as he tucked Clara into bed, the girl looked at him with sleepy but peaceful eyes. "Dad," he murmured, "I think Mom is watching over us from heaven. What do you think?" Raphael smiled, kissing his daughter's forehead. "I'm sure you do, my love. Your mother will always be with us, in our hearts." As Clara fell asleep, Raphael stayed by her side, reflecting on the day. They had faced one of their greatest fears together, the pain of the past. And although I knew there were still challenges ahead, I felt like they had taken a giant step toward healing. With his heart full of love and hope, Raphael promised himself in Carmen's memory that he would do everything possible so that Clara would grow up happy and safe, honoring the love they both felt for her. The future, although uncertain, no longer seemed so terrifying. Together, like the family they were always destined to be, Raphael and Clara were ready to face whatever came, strengthened by the love they shared and the memory of the woman who had brought them together. "What are you thinking, darling?" he asked, intrigued by his daughter's serious expression. Clara looked up from her bowl of cereal, her eyes bright with an idea. "Dad, can we visit the orphanage today? I miss my friends and I think we should do something for them." Raphael felt a surge of pride and love for his daughter's compassion. "Of course we can go. What do you have in mind?" Clara smiled, excited. "I thought we could bring them toys and books, and maybe we could organize a special day for them, like a party or a walk." Raphael nodded, moved by Clara's generosity. "It's a wonderful idea, my love. Let's do it." That same afternoon, father and daughter arrived at the orphanage loaded with gifts and with a plan to organize a day of fun for the children. Mrs. Martinez received them with open arms and tears in her eyes when she saw how well Clara was doing. While Clara was playing with her former classmates, Raphael approached the director. "Mrs. Martinez," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't thank you enough for taking care of Clara all these years. I want to do something more for this place, for these children." The director looked at him curiously. "What do you have in mind, Mr. Raphael?" Raphael took a deep breath before answering. "I want to create a foundation, one that not only helps this orphanage, but all the homeless children in the city. I want to give them the opportunity that Clara and I had to find each other." Mrs. Martinez's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Raphael, that would be wonderful. These kids need all the help they can get." As they discussed the details, Clara ran over, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Dad, Dad," he exclaimed, pulling on her hand. "Come see what we've done." Raphael let his daughter guide him to the backyard, where the children had formed a circle. In the center, they had placed flowers and small toys, forming a heart. "It's a monument," Clara explained, her eyes shining, "for all the children who are waiting to find a family, like I found you." Raphael felt his heart swell with emotion. He knelt next to Clara, hugging her tightly. "It's beautiful, my love. I'm so proud of you." Clara looked at him, her eyes full of determination. "Dad, I want to help. I want other kids to have the opportunity one had. Can we do something?" Raphael smiled, remembering the idea he had just shared with Mrs. Martinez. "Actually, honey, I was thinking about starting a foundation to help kids like you. Would you like to be a part of that?" Clara's eyes lit up with excitement. Yes, I want to help." As they watched the children play, Raphael felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. They had come a long way since that rainy day when they first met in the same orphanage. Now, not only had they healed their own wounds, but they were on their way to helping heal others. "Clara," he said softly, looking at his daughter lovingly, "do you know that you are the best thing that has ever happened to me?" Clara hugged him tightly. "And you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Dad. I love you." "I love you too, my little Maria," Raphael responded, kissing her forehead. As the sun began to set, bathing the patio in golden light, Raphael and Clara stood there, surrounded by laughter and hope. They had found their happy ending, but also a new beginning. A beginning full of promises, dreams to fulfill and lives to change. And as they prepared to return home, Raphael knew with certainty that, no matter what challenges the future might bring, they would face everything together, like the family they were always meant to be. The circle had closed, but his story, his true story, was just beginning. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel. There will always be new videos, and you won't want to miss any of these. Emotions.